How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? What's the real truth about Citizen Kane?
It'll probably turn out to be a very simple thing.
Hey everybody, we hope you're doing well. I'm Parker.
I'm Max.
And welcome back to another episode of Better Than Citizen Kane, the highly subjective show where we look at a movie and ask that titular question. Because when every movie ever made is a reasonable contender for the title of greatest film of all time, you have to wonder, better than Citizen Kane?
And if you've ever wondered what is a ghost, might I suggest a tragedy condemned to repeat itself time and again? An instant of pain, perhaps. An emotion suspended in time, like a blurred photograph, or a snow globe. Pause for massive gut-busting laughter from my co-host. You just bust your gut with that?
Did. Yeah, my gut be busted.
Oh boy. Parker, you chose The Devil's Backbone for the show this week. I would love 2001.
Yes.
Is the year it came out, directed by Guillermo del Toro, who's one of your favorites, I believe. He has some movies that you really like. I don't know if
Totally.
Did you say he's one of your favorite directors?
He's like a top 3 director for me. I like Del Toro a lot.
Del Toro's an interesting one because there's such like reverence for him, and yet I would say that most people say that half of his filmography is like, that's pretty good. You know, like Hellboy 2, like, you know, Crimson Peak, like there's these movies that people are like, either they love them or they're like, I really didn't vibe with that. And yet I think there's so much goodwill toward him, and he has like one of the most tragic back catalogs of incomplete projects that never happened, that I think also people are just like, he should have been able to do that.
I think a big part of it is like, on the one hand, he is a very meticulous filmmaker and like makes very artistic crowd pleasing films. Like he does genre filmmaking cranked to 11.
Oh yeah.
And he's great at it. And then also he just like, it's interesting because his career starts kind of right as the internet is starting to become a thing at all. And I think part of it is that like he has a certain level of like celebrity presence that isn't put on. Like any clip you see, you just tell this guy loves movies. He just loves capital M movies so much, and it's infectious anytime you see him.
Yeah, and I think that's part of like what I mean by like goodwill. Like people just, they like him. He is likable. He is like consistently, seemingly a kind man who loves a monster. And, you know, kind of, I just think like you're saying, like with the internet and everything, I think that also made it easier for people to probably seek out his earlier films.
Totally. Compared
to filmmakers that would have come before him, you know, from like other parts of the world, you know, speaking in terms of the US.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. But I just think like there's far less Guillermo del Toro films than you think there are based on how people talk about him. Right? Does that sound right? Like, I don't know. I was, you know, when I first started like looking into it, I was like shocked because, you know, I saw Pacific Rim, and then I was like, my dad would talk about Guillermo del Toro, and I was always like, yeah, so he's made like 30 of these things. Like he just kind of has, feels like he's.
Let's see. I'm curious now.
It's
like 10 maybe.
It's got to be like 10, at least
maybe
like
12.
12.
Let's see. We're gonna find out.
See if I can list them.
Yeah, do you want to take a stab at it?
I don't know. Is Kronos his first?
Kronos is his first.
This.
Nope. There's one in between.
No. Oh, is it another Spanish one then?
No, it's his first. It's his first American film, and he hates it.
It's not Slither. It's what's it called? It's the other. It's
Mimic.
Mimic. Okay. Mimic.
Yeah. So Kronos, Mimic.
This. Blade 2.
Hellboy.
Really?
Hellboy. Pan's Labyrinth. Wait, where's Blade? Hold on. I know Blade 2 is.
2. Right?
Yeah, must be. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the writer section. I skipped. Okay, where's director? Give me director, please.
He didn't write Blade 2. That's how
you're on the right. Okay, so. Kronos, Mimic, Devil's Backbone, Blade 2, Hellboy, Pan's Labyrinth.
Hellboy 2, The Golden Army. And then there's like the failed
another
Hobbit.
blockbuster.
There's another blockbuster. Is it Pacific Rim already?
It's Pacific Rim.
Right, because in between, that's when he was like doing The Hobbit for a few years.
Yeah, he was going to
and
do
then
The
he was
Hobbit.
doing in the Mouth of Madness, right? Or whatever, the Lovecraft adaptation.
Yeah,
And then Pacific Rim, and then Crimson Peak? Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Ghost movie. You don't like it.
It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Crimson Peak.
And then Shape of Water.
Shape of Water.
And then Pinocchio?
One more in between.
I don't know what that one is.
Nightmare Alley.
Nightmare Alley. I've seen that one.
You're like, wait a second.
That movie, I mean, okay. I think that movie's... You've seen that movie?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I think it's good. I think that Bradley Cooper in the lead role makes it instantly unmemorable for me.
Yeah.
I find him so bland in that movie.
Yeah, he's not great in that movie.
And it doesn't help that he's going up against like Cate Blanchett, Rooney Mara, Toni Collette, Willem Dafoe, and then Bradley Cooper. And I'm like, okay, all right.
Okay, yeah. So since 1992, he's made 12 movies.
We were spot on with 12.
Yep.
That's great. So all this to say, I would say that Pan's Labyrinth is probably his most popular of this period and of this kind. You know, obviously he's got probably more recognizable franchise films.
Sure.
So I'm just curious, what draws you to specifically The Devil's Backbone? I ask this rhetorically. I think I probably know. But what draws you specifically to The Devil's Backbone? Why do you bring that to better than Citizen Kane rather than one of his more well-known or well-regarded films?
It's a lot of things. First off, I think this movie is a little bit underrated in his catalog. I think more people deserve to see it, especially because like he describes this for a long time. I don't know if this is still accurate or not. The last like recorded instance I could find of this was like 2009. But for a long time, he would say this was his personal favorite of the films that he made. He was really happy with this one. So partially, I just want to introduce people to it who maybe haven't found it because I think it's really good. Personal preferences, it's just like I love a ghost movie. I love a ghost movie, and I think this is a really good ghost movie. I like this ghost a lot. I think Santi is a very well-made movie ghost, and is operating on a lot of levels of like what I want out of a ghost film. And I'm curious to talk to you more about this because I know that, you know, you and I are on very similar wavelengths for what we want out of ghost films, but we differ slightly in certain areas.
We do, and we also differ on this film.
Yes, we do.
In particular. Would you like to engage in our bit? Would you like to call me out?
Yeah.
For hating this film?
So real quick, everybody. I want it on record that for months now, for coming up on years now, Max has gone out of his way to make a big show anytime I rate a movie 4 stars. And he's like, oh, so you hated it. You hated the film I suggested and brought along. And then this rat bastard turns around and gives this 4 stars. So ladies and gentlemen, I need you to know Max Bennion hates The Devil's Backbone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah, you hate this movie.
Yeah.
I knew it.
I mean, you've got me there engaging. I can't go against my own rhetoric because if I do here on this one,
everything falls apart.
Then I can never say that you hate a movie just because you gave it 4 stars.
Mm-hmm. And that's too important to you.
Yeah, it is.
I knew it.
It's more important to me to call you out when you don't give my favorite movies 5 stars.
Mm-hmm. I see. All right. Fair enough.
No, I don't. Actually, I don't hate this movie.
Yes, he does.
But for purposes of the bit, I do.
He hates it.
So when did you see this for the first time? What's your history with this?
I saw this for the first time. Let me double check my letterboxd. I think I watched it for the first time within the past like 4 years, but I'm trying to remember if I'd seen it.
I want to say, because I did check your activity on this to see if your score had changed.
He stalked my activity. My God.
I did, and I think it's 2020. I think it's October 2020.
That's what it looks
right?
like. That's what it says as a first-time watch. Was October 2020. So I think probably what that was still dealing with the COVID pandemic, needing lots of movies to watch. Had seen Shape of Water and Pan's Labyrinth and Pacific Rim. Like knew Del Toro, liked Del Toro a lot, and was trying to kind of dig into his back catalog a little bit, and this was in the Criterion collection, and so I was like, what's this? So I watched it, and I was like, ooh, pretty good. And interesting, kind of taking a look at that. The first time I watched this, I gave it 4 stars.
You did.
Then I gave it 5 a year later. I gave it 4.5 2 years later, and then I gave it 5 again this time. And I also noticed that it was almost exactly a year from when I watched this with you for movie night last year to when I watched it again. So September 26th to September 27th.
Yeah, and for me, September 26th to September 28th.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess now everyone's going to know that I only gave myself a day to think about this movie before bringing it to the pod, but that's okay, and I've seen it before. Fun fact, for those who listened to our Paranorman episode, one of our least listened to episodes, those of you out there who did, Parker and I watched Paranorman together last year, and then immediately after watched The Devil's Backbone.
Yes.
Because we were like,
and you got upset at me, where you were like,
I did.
I think you, for whatever reason, I liked Paranorman.
No, Parker hated it.
Yeah, but Max just, I think, was feeling self-conscious about the movie. He's like, I don't know, I wanted you to watch it. Like, it was a good movie, Max. No. And I watched Devil's Backbone, and he just kind of continued with that bit. He's like, oh, cool, I show you this stop-motion kids movie, and you bring, some Spanish horror masterpiece.
Parker's
cool, great, fun.
Parker's like, oh, this is, it's nice, Max. That's nice. Here's a really sad ghost movie that's really well made. And I was like, I'm gonna go now. But we got it on the show this year.
We did.
It's back. I watched it again. My history is that you had told me about it for years. You've shown this at movie nights for the last 3 years that I've known you.
Yeah, it's shown up a lot.
Every time you've shown it at a movie night, I have missed it.
Yep.
It has been the movie that I have missed every single time, which is why last year I was like, can we just knock that out? Like, I was like,
can we just do this?
It's like, because I feel like I don't want you to think that I'm like avoiding this film, but also that meant, and I was, because I knew I'd hate it.
Because he knew he'd hate it.
This is a movie where I genuinely had a completely different idea of what this movie was. I had invented an entirely different Criterion cover for it in my head before we watched it. And I was like, what is this movie about? Because I fully was just like, the devil's in this movie. I'm pretty sure it's about the devil and hell, and it's not.
Not at all.
So I saw it for the first time almost a year ago, and then I watched it again yesterday. And that is my history with The Devil's Backbone.
There you go.
What do you think of the title?
Interesting you bring that up. So the title, this movie, Del Toro wrote the first draft of this in like college. This has been sitting around in his brain for like 16 years, basically. And he would approach it in a variety of different ways as he was working on it. And one of the original passes was there is a mountain range in Mexico called the Devil's Backbone. And the myth behind it is that at the beginning of time, God and Satan came and fought for the soul of man, and God won, and he ripped the devil's spine out, and it became that mountain range, and he stayed on earth, and God ascended to heaven. And because God was on earth, he had a closer influence to man. It's easier to sin than it is to be righteous. He was closer to man. And so one of the first drafts of this was that it was going to take place near this mountain range, and it was still going to be the orphanage, but the idea was that I don't remember exactly the interval he'd made up, like maybe 10 years. Like every 10 years, let's say, God and the devil would fight for the soul of a single man. And it was going to be Carlos. It was going to be this boy. And that was like the backdrop of this. As he was writing it, they were doing like location scouts and everything. And they had already decided they were going to film in Spain instead of Mexico, or that it was going to be set in Spain. Yeah. And he's like, I couldn't find a mountain range that worked. Like even the real Devil's Backbone mountain range, like it's not in the right spot. Like we couldn't find a good place for an orphanage, so he just scrapped that and he moved on. Instead, what he took is those kind of the fetuses in jars. There's a real thing that existed and happened, and like the exposed spinal cord was something that people would say like, oh well, that baby's cursed. Like that was that reason that baby didn't get born is because it was evil, it was satanic, all these things. And so he just took that name. He's like, all right, we'll just call that the Devil's Backbone and attach it there. So that's kind of where the name comes from in here.
I mean, okay, first off, God Devil Fight for a Soul of Man movie sounds awesome.
Yeah.
But continue. I just wanted to hold space for it.
Yeah, no, he's like doing the interview
cool
and he's just telling, he's like, oh yeah, he just rips his spine out and it becomes a mountain range. And I'm like,
that's
go on.
That's really cool.
That's really cool.
It's really cool.
But so that's kind of where the name comes from. But this began life as his thesis film for a screenwriting program. And he only made it as far as a treatment. He wasn't happy with it. And so just over the years, he would just keep reworking it, keep reapproaching it. At a certain point, the antagonistic character, rather than being, one of the older orphan boys, Jacinto, that comes later, it was going to be kind of a evil specter. There was going to be a good ghost and a bad ghost.
Sure.
Went through a lot of different things. Circling back around to your first question, knowing the context of where the name comes from helps, but like I've always caught a little bit on the title and that scene with the baby jars, because I'm like, this doesn't really go anywhere.
I can't figure out how it plays into the political allegory, the allegory of like people being made ghosts by wartime and political strife, like the pickled fetus rum, as it were. I just have never been able to quite make it fit in my head. Like, it's very interesting. It feels very Del Toro.
Sure.
And it makes like it's an interesting visual. And but I've personally, and I should have looked into it a little bit more before this, but I've just never really been able to like figure what it's doing here.
After watching this movie like once a year since I saw it, the conclusion I've come to is that it draws in parallel to like him talking about like what a ghost is, what a memory is. And he's like, it's trapped in amber. And like the visual of that,
I mean,
looks
the
a
title
lot like
sequence
Santi's pool.
also, and the title sequence has that. That's true. I guess visually,
which is all practical, by the way. Literally, they just have a tank with a little like baby puppet, and they're just spinning it around in front of camera, and it looks super cool. And like when I first watched it, I thought it was just, I'm like, oh, that's a little interesting early CG effect. Nope, it's just a puppet in water.
I love that. Making him spin around.
It's the behind the scenes really funny.
Oh, I believe it.
Looks very silly, but yeah, in camera it looks great. But yeah, I agree. Like it's the title in context of the metaphor, I do have a hard time sussing out precisely.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just like, I think that it, like, obviously, like, yeah, like the visual metaphor works. It's just like when it's called after that, when it's titled after that, I am like, this is so crucial to this movie. And yet, and that's fine. Ultimately, that's not something that I like. That's not why it's 4 stars. It's not like I'm like 4 stars because the title doesn't make sense. I'm just like,
no, I get it though.
I've always been curious, so I was
I'm glad you asked. My best guess would probably be, and maybe there's something I'm missing completely that Del Toro is like, here's the obvious answer, but like knowing the background, my personal guess is just that they got attached to the title when it was something different, and they just kept the title even though the story changed. It is a good title. Yeah. But springboarding off of that into kind of some general research.
Background.
Yeah, some background. So this film is directed by Guillermo del Toro, written by Del Toro, David Munoz, and Antonio Trosores. It's produced by a big name, which I remember the first time I watched it, I was like,
I saw that. I caught that. It's
like the opening credits.
Right?
Yep. Pedro Almodovar produced this film. And the context behind that is that him and Del Toro met at the Miami Film Festival in 1994, where Cronos was screening, and he really loved it. And he approached Del Toro and says, "Hey, I would love to produce your next film." His next film ended up being a Hollywood production through Miramax, working with the Weinsteins, which we're not talking about Mimic, but it's important that we talk about what was going on during Mimic because it informs this movie, right? So.
Okay.
Del Toro talks about how he considers this his first film. He's like, Cronos was incredibly difficult to make and was just like a fight uphill the entire time. He's like, I'm happy with the film in a lot of ways, but also like it's a first feature and it's pretty low budget. It's all very limited in its scope and it's, how it's approached. His next film is Mimic, and he says he barely got to do what he wanted to do with it. He was constantly being meddled with, and just like an experience that made him want to quit making movies. Like after Mimic, he's like, I think I'm done, actually. I think this is awful and miserable, and I hate it. And Backbone was his way of falling back in love with cinema and just being like, oh, I can make a movie I want to make. It can be what I want it to be. And part of why Mimic was so difficult is that he was working with the Weinsteins, which he said was a miserable experience.
I was going to say, I mean, like that in and of itself is like, everything we know now aside, famously, hard to work with for filmmakers because they wanted to cut everything. They wanted a very specific amount of control over
totally
the final product.
Yeah, and like the stuff I was finding too was kind of alluding to the fact that, I don't know if it was this case always, but especially in Del Toro's circumstance, it was that like they had a tendency of talking down to young foreign filmmakers where they're like, well, you don't actually know what you're doing. Like, this is a Hollywood production. It's like, well, you hired them for a reason. Like, they must, like, Kronos was well received, you know?
Yeah. A weird little object, but well received.
Exactly.
I find Kronos fascinating.
Kronos is such an interesting little movie. So he's dealing with all of that. On top of that, during the production of Kronos in 1997, Del Toro's father was kidnapped in Guadalajara.
During Kronos?
Sorry, excuse me. Mimic. Apologies.
Okay.
Yeah, during
His
Mimic.
father was kidnapped.
His father was kidnapped while he's doing Mimic. They initially wanted $1 million, ended up upping it to $2 million. And one, you know,
why?
Because they could. They were just like, hey, you know, you're making a big Hollywood movie. So we're coming after you now. And he was in the States making the movie. His family's still down in Mexico.
Right.
So that's, they're just like, oh, okay, you are a target because you came from Mexico. We know who you are. You know, he's well known in, you know, the Mexico film community, but now he's working on a Hollywood film. So like, oh, you are now somebody that we can kind of go after. We famously kind of aren't huge James Cameron fans on the podcast, just as a general person, I think, when we did the Titanic episode, you know?
Yeah.
However, James Cameron, when he got wind of this, immediately became involved. He paid for the negotiator. He, like, coached Del Toro through it, like, really just kind of showed up and helped him through all of this. They ended up paying the kidnappers $2 million. They got his father back. The kidnappers were never caught. The money was never retrieved again.
Okay.
They just got the money and disappeared.
Wow.
After all of this, Del Toro moved his family and his siblings abroad, whether to the U.S. or other places. Everybody just fled Mexico, pretty much. And he talked about in an interview in 2009, he said, quote, "Every day, every week, something happens that reminds me I am in involuntary exile from my country." Like this experience was just awful for him. But I bring this up. He has a quote talking about this, and he says, "My first American experience was almost my last because it was with the Weinsteins and Miramax. I've got to tell you, 2 horrible things happened in the late 90s. My father was kidnapped, and I worked with the Weinsteins. I know which one was worse. The kidnapping made more sense. I knew what they wanted."
Yeah.
Which is just like, okay, that is now quote. It's a great quote, and that is the comparison bar of working with the Weinsteins. It's like, well,
it is.
Having my father kidnapped at least makes more sense.
You know what kidnappers want.
You know what they want.
Yeah.
Wow. So all of this to say, like, that's where his headspace is going into Devil's Backbone, is he's just had this awful personal life experience. He's had this horrendous time trying to make this movie with the Weinsteins. Almost makes him quit making movies. And Devil's Backbone was kind of like, you know, you and I have talked about, you know, the process of Lee Isaac Chung making Minari, where it was like, well, this is going to be my last movie. And then it's, you know, this wonderful piece of art and it's this huge success. It kind of, from the interview clips, it kind of sounds like this was going to be his last movie. He was like, okay, I'm going to make something I really love and want to make, and then I'm done doing this because it just sucks.
Through that lens, the film really works as, like, if you view it as a filmmaker's attempt to be like, here's the final thing that I'm gonna, you know, like, it feels like he gave it his all, you know?
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's part of, like, before ever knowing all of that, I think, like, you can feel a lot of that in the film, and then after knowing that, like you said, like, it's so much clearer, and something that draws me a lot to the film is just, I'm like, this feels very personal to him in a lot of ways, which I like. He considers this and Pan's Labyrinth to be like twin films. He's like, they're siblings.
I mean, they're set in a similar period. I haven't seen Pan's Labyrinth.
What?
No, we've talked about this. I
just forgot.
I've seen the order of his, you know, kind of trilogy there of like Kronos, Devil's Backbone, Pan's Labyrinth. I've seen them in order.
Yeah.
So at some point I'll watch Pan's Labyrinth.
Watch Pan's Labyrinth. It's a really good movie. But
and
he says,
who kept inviting me to movie nights and not showing me Pan's Labyrinth, Parker?
Well, I'm glad to know I'm entirely responsible for any exposure to cinema you have. But yeah, he says he considers these films twin films, this one being like the masculine brother film and Pan's Labyrinth being the feminine sister film, which is interesting.
Because the kids are different.
For the kids, yes. Also, a weird little thing that just makes me laugh is that for any of you Criterion nerds out there, the spine number for this is 666.
Which maybe is why I thought the devil had more to do with it.
Understandable. Yeah.
It's really...
But
there's not a lot of, like...
Not a lot of devilry
in this movie.
Let's see. That's kind of all of the broad table setting, and then I've got a couple. This one's interesting, and also part of the reason why I thought it would be fun to bring this to the podcast as opposed to Pan's Labyrinth is like there is so much writing that's been done about Pan's Labyrinth, and this one is a little bit harder to find stuff on.
It's also seen a lot less. I mean, I'm using Letterboxd as a metric for that, which maybe isn't the way to do it, but I feel like compared to other Del Toro films, this one isn't seen very often. I mean, Cronus is probably less seen, but yeah.
But yeah, just interesting for sure. In that case, do we want to hop on into some summary?
Sure. Yeah. Opening narration and prologue is really great. I think, speaking about what is a ghost.
Yeah.
Emotion, trapped in amber, all that good stuff, which is a philosophy on ghosts that I really vibe with and agree with. Real quick, Parker, should we discuss ghost movie? What do we, because that's a huge thing for us.
Yeah,
that's a huge point
you
of
get the ball
bonding
rolling
for
with
us.
ghost movie here.
Well, so the concept of a ghost movie, it's a movie about a ghost. Parker and I believe that there is not, well, maybe Parker doesn't believe this, if this is a 5-star movie, but Parker and I believe that there is not the perfect ghost movie that we want to see.
There isn't. This is a 5-star movie for me. This isn't my perfect ghost movie.
There are pieces in so many great ghost movies. The Haunting, The Innocents, The Uninvited, this movie. I'm sure there's plenty more that we could list here.
The Hill House stuff.
The Hill House stuff. But so much of it is like, well, okay. Well, I don't want to, let's not bring in Hill House yet. Look, Parker, we'll talk once you watch it this October.
Yeah.
But there's just a lot of like great ghost movies out there, but they're never exactly what we want. And I don't even know if we fully can discern what we want.
Yeah. I know what it isn't,
I know what it isn't because I've seen it several times. And so anyway, ghosts are a big thing for us.
Yes.
Is that fair to say?
I'd say so.
Would you have anything to add to that? I feel like I talked very broadly.
No. I think you covered the bases really well. Of like it's this weird cross section of like taking moments from all of those films where it's like, okay, a ghost should be frightening but not sinister most of the time. Like a lot of ghosts are going to be neutral, but also they're ghosts. They're spooky, They're kind of off-putting and scary. A good like haunting sequence of any kind, like, the crying in The Uninvited is so good. Yeah. Just like
frightening. Jessel standing in the field in The Innocents is very spooky. Yeah. The door bending in The Haunting.
Yeah. There's just stuff like that. But like a lot of the time, at least in my experience, a lot of the time, like the ghostly aspects of the film don't quite coalesce with some of those examples. Like a lot of the time, like the ghostiness of it is a backdrop element, and I think you and I want it to be a foreground element.
Yeah. I think, yes, I agree. I think mainly what I want out of ghost stories is something that's scary, something that's sad, but mostly from ghosts, I am most interested in them if they are acting as people.
Yeah.
If ghosts are people, they are not evil because they are a ghost. They are not, benign because they are a ghost. I think it's interesting when a ghost has a motivation of some sort. And therefore that can come out as acting very, vengefully, menacingly. It can be sinister if that's who the ghost is. But I find that to be the most interesting and therefore, because it's a person acting from beyond the grave, I go, well, okay, that's automatically sad and also scary usually.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like at its core, what I want a ghost to be is a person who is basically entirely devoted to one emotion almost, I don't know. Is that, maybe that's not what I want to say, but no one hold me to that, but that's what I'm saying today.
Well, it's on mic now, but.
Oh boy.
He's on the record.
But yeah, ghosts are cool. We love ghosts. We love a ghost movie. And I'm excited to talk to you about the ghosts in this film,
Yes.
and that is ghosts plural.
Plural, baby.
Also, this is the first time I've seen this since I think we watched the others after we watched this.
I think we did.
I just want to quickly say that I think one of the scariest form of ghost is unseen barefoot child running. Is like one of the scariest things you could. I mean, anyone running who you can't see is scary, but like just that specific, like almost like barefoot on wood or on tile.
Yeah.
Really effective, really scary every time.
Yep. Very much so.
Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to give that a quick shout out. So prologue, title sequence. Kind of setting its thesis of like, what is a ghost?
Yes.
Carlos, played by Fernando Tielve, is brought to an isolated orphanage in 1939 following his father's demise in the Spanish Civil War. He doesn't know his father's dead, and we get kind of we're putting our pieces in place. Carmen, the headmistress, played by Marissa Paredes, is concerned about the expenses of caring for yet another boy, and she mentions the hidden stash of gold bars she keeps in the building that she'd prefer to be rid of, as she cannot spend it.
Yeah.
And she also is uncomfortable with it being there because it's the Spanish Civil War, and she's afraid of like the nationalists finding out about it and coming for it. Because she is like basically funding or like assisting the Republicans, the revolutionaries, or rather the loyalists. I can't remember who's.
Yeah, the Reds.
Yes, the Reds. Because I had to look up the Spanish Civil War and be like, what was this being fought?
Like, what was the conflict?
And it's like, yeah, the Republicans were like believing in like, kind of the government that existed, a more left-leaning government, and the revolutionaries in this case were more conservative, more kind of fascist kind of ideals.
Sure.
It's way more nuanced than that. No one think that that's all I think it is about.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah,
Max
we
Bennion,
also
expert.
We meet our cast of characters. Carlos is like, I'm not staying here, and Jaime's like, all right, says some slurs at him.
Yeah.
And
during the title
left
sequence,
there.
we meet Jaime because we see
We
a
do.
boy who has a gash in his head, and Jaime's standing above him, and the boy is
I will
submerged.
say that I don't think we need to get super in detail on like every beat of this.
Sure.
But I do think something that I want to mention just here with Jaime, with the title sequence here, and also later, just kind of jumping around is what I mean. This movie is very interesting in that it isn't holding the reveals back necessarily. There is a big piece of the story that it kind of waits until the end to fully unveil, but the title sequence shows Jaime standing over his boy, and then Carlos sees the reflection of that boy almost immediately upon arrival at the orphanage. And I also want to just shout out our first full reveal of Santi is not what Carlos sees. We see him privately when he's hiding in the cistern kind of basement area. And I think that's really fascinating that it is not a moment of terror in which we see him. It is a moment of him hiding from another boy.
Santi looks scared. He
looks scared of Carlos.
He looks scared of Carlos, which I like a lot.
Yeah, so what is your... I mean, that feels very Guillermo del Toro monster, actually.
Yeah,
scared
actually
little
nice guy.
boy, right?
Misunderstood.
And it happens so early.
Yeah.
And like they are not... It's not like a Jaws situation where they're like keeping... I mean, Jaws is maybe a poor example because they literally technically couldn't show the shark the way they wanted to.
Sure.
But like it's not like they're withholding him for an ultimate scare reveal. Because they just reveal him to us as what he is, a scared boy. So I just wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, you love the Santi design.
I love the Santi design.
And I agree.
And I've got some good research on Santi going on. But like, first off, I think that's part of the reason why I like this so much as a ghost story, because like they let Santi be scary. Like there is a horror sequence with Santi as the stalker, and they let it be scary, but also that's not our introduction to the character, and both kind of that's the duality of a ghost that I love, is like you were talking about, a ghost should be something and someone that is does, like you said, has personhood, has their own motivations, and whether they be good or bad, they're still, self-motivated, and Santi is. But also, ghosts are frightening. I'm sure if I saw Santi down at the end of my corridor, I would be spooked. Even, if I knew who Santi was after seeing this movie, I was like, huh, it's kind of frightening,
Yeah, scary.
And so I like that aspect of this a lot. Del Toro doesn't pull away from the frightfulness of the unknown, but very quickly tells us that you don't have to fear the unknown just because it's the unknown,
Right. Well, and he's very quick to kind of introduce, just kind of getting there later, so Carlos's first night, Jaime is like, we're going to go sneak down to the kitchen for water after basically Santi spills the pitcher of water in the dormitory. Carlos agrees, dares Jaime to accompany him. They pass by the large diffused bomb in the courtyard, which fell months prior, which is it's just a very fascinating and excellent cinematic image. I love the image of a bomb just dropped in the middle of a courtyard to be like, this is what it feels like living under war. Is just, there is a bomb that could go off at any time.
And all the adults around you are telling you it's diffused, it's not dangerous. And the boys are like, I think it's still ticking. I think it's still alive. Yeah.
Because you would.
Yeah.
And you can even see it as like a metaphor to Jacinto. Like you could see it as just tension bubbling in every single relationship here. It is a bomb about to go off, and yet the bomb never does.
And that's another thing I really love about this movie and the way it is structured, and like the central metaphor and visual language is that it's like I would teach in a screenwriting class how this is the perfect example of like subverting expectations, where it's like, hey, you're still going to get the payoff. Like, later on, Santi's like, hey, many of you are going to die.
Yes.
And you know it's coming. But also it's, it's Chekhov's gun, but the gun doesn't go off. Something else goes off,
Yeah, because there is an explosion later.
Yeah.
But again, it's not the bomb. It is the people that revolve around it.
Right.
Something that's really interesting that I want to bring up is, obviously, I can't talk about ghost media without talking about my love for Mike Flanagan's take on ghosts, particularly in his Haunting series.
Yes.
And in Bly Manor, which I think is the lesser of the two, there's this concept of like almost like a gravity well that keeps ghosts on the premises. And I love the line in this movie where it's like, the bomb came, like, and what about the ghost? And it's like, well, the ghost came with the bomb.
Yeah.
And like what that means, and also what that implies about everyone else, because you also have Carmen saying, I feel like we're the ghosts. Like, I really love what this is doing with that. And I also love that, like, the bomb feels like a gravity well for all of this tension. It weighs on everyone, right? And also kind of creates ghosts out of everybody as a symbol for the war. Anyway, it's just a really excellent metaphor. Obviously, as we're talking about. So they pass by the bomb, they get into the kitchen, Jaime sneaks back to the dormitory, Carlos is alone, and I think, is this where he first hears Santi say, many of you will die?
I believe so.
Later?
I think that's why he runs and he gets scared.
Yes, because he goes down into the yes. And that's where we see Santi for the first time.
Yeah. So this whole sequence, what's really interesting about it is like Del Toro wanted the basement to, like, it's very much the lair, right? To the point that, like, there's the corridor that leads to the stairs down, and on the wall, he's like, we spent months working out the exact, like, pattern of, like, the salt deposits on the wall. Because, like, I wanted it to look like it had been underwater, that entire room had been underwater.
Yes. And when the light, like, reflects back up and you see, like, he does so much with the shadow of Santi coming up the stairs or going down the stairs.
Totally.
And it has that watery look to the shadows. Absolutely.
Yeah. And like the very first time Carlos spots Santi standing in the doorway, he's there, he looks back and he's gone. And when he's gone, there's still the water shimmer in the doorway. There's still little particles floating in the air, which is really cool. Yeah. But like, so water's a big motif of that. Because of that, like he wanted Santi's, his approach was, he's like, think porcelain doll. He's like, I want it to look like a porcelain doll with the crack and the all white. And he's got these oxide tears that match the rust in the environment down there in the water. Because it's like, okay, yeah, this is somebody who died a watery death. So he's got the crack in the top with the head kind of the blood pooling out,
pooling up,
which is
in
really,
kind of a
I love that
cloudy,
visual.
watery form. The skeleton part is really interesting to me.
So the skeleton part is, so he wanted it to be very much more visible and present. They couldn't do that with the budget. And so what he did is that the workaround that he had is that he's like, okay, you'll see it fully whenever he's in moonlight. So there's the scene where he's chasing him down the hallway, and whenever he goes through the pools of light, the skeleton like comes forward very, prominently. And other than that, it's much more viscous because they just
It is.
couldn't. They didn't have it in the budget to do that for every shot with Santi.
And also, it still looks great.
It still
for
looks
2001 visual effects. It still looks great.
It's really, really good.
And I love the inclusion of a skeleton in a ghost, something that you don't see very often.
I like it. It's a great. I think it's just such good like ghost monster character design. It's really great.
Guillermo del Toro having a really great character design in his
crazy,
movie?
right?
Crazy.
And he sketches a lot. He has these notebooks upon notebooks, and he came up with like the basic first passes on this design, and then worked with his team. But what's interesting is that he wanted the skin to be all white, but because of that, he's like, to light that face, it's gonna be 1 or 2 stops above whoever is standing next to them to be properly exposed. So they had to work and find this very specific color mixture to get the broken glass white look under any lighting conditions, no matter what. And also they'd be able to photograph Carlos next to him and the skin tones would still look right. And it's something that, like, you don't even think about during the movie, but like it was a long process of trial and error of like trying to figure that out. Yeah. So just like, he's so like, his quote was, I wanted it to be the most beautiful ghost ever. Yeah. That's what he wanted out of Santi's design. I think he achieves that. I think it's haunting. Exactly is the word I would use.
It's a great effect.
You know?
It's a really great effect.
But yeah, back to, he meets Santi.
So he meets Santi, he runs out. Before that, though, Jacinto, played by Eduardo Noriega, hears commotion in the kitchen and investigates the gold safe, which Carlos sees. Carlos almost gets away before the boys in the bedroom fire a slingshot, breaking Carlos's water vase and alerting Jacinto again. He gets caught. Next morning, Dr. Cesaris, played by actor I didn't write the name down of, and I'm really bummed about it.
I don't have it.
He's a guy from Kronos.
He's a guy from Kronos. He's also in Pan's Labyrinth as well.
Yeah,
he pops up a lot in Del Toro stuff.
He's
really good.
He fails to get Carlos to give up any accomplices who snuck out with him the previous night, but he figures it out anyway. He's smart. Yeah. Later, Jaime confronts Carlos about this by the cistern under the chapel in the presence of a few other boys, kind of their little group of people, one of whom is named Owl.
Yep.
And I love the line that the kid says where he's like, he doesn't talk much, but he's always staring at you or something. That's great. Though Jaime now holds a higher respect for Carlos, he still feels threatened by the newcomer, pulls a knife out to prove his dominance. I love how quickly this is dealt with. Yeah. Which is to say that like Jaime's like pulls out a knife and he's like, and then Carlos just grabs like a rock and just throws it and he's just out. Like he just gets knocked out, falls in the water. He can't swim. So Carlos has to save Jaime. And then you even get another Santi inclusion there, which is great. Everything in the water is really cool.
It's really good.
Everything in the water is really cool, really well done. So they save him. Jacinto comes down. He finds the knife. He's like, whose knife is this? And Carlos, once again, is like, that's me. Cuts his cheek and says, if any of you talk about this, I'll rip you in half.
Yeah.
And the boys are all shaken by the incident, but Jaime begins to trust Carlos at last. What do you think about the relationship between Jaime and Carlos in this movie? I mean, Jaime is kind of that classic, school bully character, but I really like how subverted it is. Again, it subverts your expectations of him.
Totally. That's the thing, like, it's so interesting because a lot of the structure of this movie is very, like, fairy tale, folktale-esque in its archetyping, but then, again, like, pivots it ever so slightly, right? Like, the ghost is scary, but is not actually the villain here. You know?
I was going to say earlier, the thing that's scary about Santi is obviously how he looks, but also that he is an omen. He is saying many of you will die. And I really like how, like you said, like there's this expectation of like, oh, well, then the bomb's going to go off. Like you're just like, you're so firm in like this ghost is part of this and the bomb's going to go off.
Totally. And like same thing with Jaime where like we're introduced to him standing over Santi's body and we're like, oh, and Jaime killed this kid.
We later learn that it's a box that they were putting slugs in.
Yeah.
But it looks like a brick. It looks like he hit him over the head. Like it's very specific in its visual language of that.
And so I think that's very interesting of like the folktale version of this is that Jaime killed him and he's the bad guy and he's the school bully and all those things. But like you said, it subverts that and moves it around very quickly. And I like how quick, like in a lesser version of this movie, they wouldn't reconcile until the explosion has happened and they have that conversation.
Right.
And I like that they're friends before that. And I like that Carlos is going out of his way to be his friend.
Yeah, and it feels very natural, the the pacing of it, of
Totally.
like even like after the kind of the fight at the cistern and Jacinto and everything, when they wake him up in the middle of the night and Jaime's like, "Don't worry, I'm not going to punch you." Like I just like he's aware of this dynamic and he's like, "No, I'm not going to do that," but he's still cold to him, and I think that it's really nice to have a bully character in a school movie like this and have the empathy be towards them early on, like so early on from the beginning, because oftentimes these movies go, well, later we're going to tell you why he acted this way. But this movie's like, he can also warm up to him before then too.
Yeah.
I also find Carlos and Jaime interesting as parallels to Jacinto. Specifically, Carlos being, a complete, or he's got no one in the world to miss him, and I mean that's true of all these boys.
Sure.
But especially Jacinto, who is, he gives the ring to Jacinto's fiance, Conchita, and kind of like we learn also that like Carmen and Jacinto have been like having this loveless affair since he was, since he was 17, and I mean I'm not saying that that's like what they're doing with Conchita and Jaime, but like it's clearly a reflection of Jacinto's past.
Totally.
Right? Like when Jaime's giving her the ring, and obviously it's his fiance, so he's like, Jaime, open the gate. But you can also see it as like, he's also like, oh, you're, like, I almost feel from Jacinto, he's like, well, I know where this goes.
Yeah, I've been here, right?
I've been
and like
here before.
I really like his characterization because he is deplorable. He's detestable. He's a good villain. And he's also a victim in so many ways. And like, again, that's what I think Del Toro, the same empathy he brings to the monster, he still brings to his villains while letting them be villainous. Like Pan's Labyrinth also does this really well too. And like it's a strong suit of his of like, here is the deplorable, detestable human being in context of like the monster you should be scared of. But also the human being is still a human being. And that's like Del Toro's one of his strengths. And I love that about his body of work.
Yeah, it's like the human being is still the human being. And that includes monsters who are also human beings, by the way.
Totally.
Right? Like that is his, like, that's his entire statement. I'm just trying to see if I had any notes about any of this.
Yes, please.
Do you know if they built this whole orphanage?
Or
did they use an exterior that's...
It's a location they built on top of. So it was an abandoned building that had been used in several other films. The production designer was like, I don't like the fact that it's been in other movies. Like, it's recognizable. And they built on top of it and augmented it enough that he's like, okay, it's its own thing now. But yeah, it is a building that exists that they kind of furnished up.
So the tile floor is original? Because I love the pattern of the tile floor. Just
I would either it's original or, it's a Del Toro movie. It's probably a very intentional choice in some regards.
If you haven't noticed it, it's very nice.
It is. Good tile.
Also on the subject of Jacinto, he is dressed exactly like Brendan Fraser in The Mummy.
Yes, he is.
Right down to the hairstyle. It's that 30s protagonist look.
I'm so glad you brought up the hairstyle because there's something I want to mention about his hair at the end of the movie.
Yes.
Go on.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah, I've mostly talked about everything else that I've so far. So
okay, yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to bring up like if Jacinto sees himself in Jaime, then that also ties into the theme of like being frozen in amber, emotions being frozen. This is a place that is stuck in time, right? So yeah. By the way, Carmen is so the boys tell Carlos of a supposed ghost of the orphanage, a boy called Santi. He vanished the night the bomb was dropped. There's some theories as to what happened to him. They hear some strange sighing noises and they believe it is the ghost of Santi, when in reality, Carmen and Jacinto are having an affair. It is revealed that Jacinto has been at the orphanage since he was a boy, like we just talked about. He harbors a passionate hatred for it, and he knows of the stash of gold hidden at the orphanage. Yeah. And he's using his sexual relationship with Carmen as an opportunity to take her keys and search the building for the loot. So there you go. There's some more. Carlos decides to locate the ghost himself after recalling the strange voice he had heard in the kitchen. He sneaks out again that night and encounters the ghost. And this time Santi pursues him back into the building. And this is kind of that horror sequence you were talking about. And do you want to talk on this?
It's just like, I don't know. It's so like, it's basic filmmaking storytelling, but it's also really good of like, what's great about a ghost is that it can appear anywhere. And like one of the earliest instances we have of that is when Carlos is in bed, you see Santi's silhouette on the other side of the curtain. And he pulls the curtain away and there's nothing.
It's fantastic. It's really good. Is such a good again, just like ghost imagery.
Yeah,
Love
and
ghost
so,
imagery.
this sequence opens with, Carlos running back, and we see, like, it kind of cranes upward as Carlos runs out of the building. You see the bomb in, the left side of the frame, and then the doorway, and you see Santi, like, trudge out towards the doorway, and that's where we see him. And he's only existed really in that
kitchen.
space, in the kitchen, right?
Besides behind the curtain at the bed,
Right.
and
But, like,
he'll
visually
appear, but he
when we
won't
see him.
visually be there. Yeah,
Yeah. So Carlos runs back in. He gets to the hallway leading to the bedrooms, and he's kind of bent over. And when he lifts his head, you see Santi down at the end of the corridor where he wasn't there before. Like, you see the empty doorway at first, and then when he lifts his head, like,
that's really
again, good ghosts. Just
very
popping up.
effective ghost filmmaking. And then they do a little bit of a. It's a very short horror sequence.
It is.
Though.
It's very
again.
short.
I remembered it being there. There was a lot more running around.
No, it's just the
But
the
really,
hallway
it's
to
just
the
that one
closet.
hallway. Santi walking very slowly, and Carlos gets into the closet, closes the door. You get maybe the one jump scare in the entire film.
Yeah.
Which isn't really even a jump scare because it's set up.
Yeah.
Like you're like, wow, what's going to appear in the keyhole?
Oh,
And then I love the knock and the twisting of the door handle.
It's really good. Yeah, and the eye, all that stuff. That does remind me. One personal ding I have against this movie is the first time Carlos finds Santi down in the cellar and he reaches out and then disappears. The canned woman scream bothers me. I'm like, man, that's bad. Why did you just record somebody?
Yeah, I caught it. This, and I'm like, who's that?
I was like, why is there a Scooby-Doo cartoon scream here?
It's really good.
It's silly.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I forgot about that.
It makes me laugh every time.
Yeah.
But you mentioned jump scares, so like that sound effect jumped to mind.
Oh yeah, that I guess would be the other one when he turns to and he's there and it goes, ah! Or no, it's when he fades, isn't it?
Yeah, he grabs him and then the scream happens and it's like, okay. Well. But yeah, it's a very short horror sequence, like you said. It's very like this whole movie is very ergonomic. There is not a lot of fat to trim off this thing.
I mean, it's what, an hour 48, hour
something
50?
like that. Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, close.
Yeah,
It gets in, it gets out.
Yeah, it does. And yet I saw some people on Letterboxd saying that they feel that it's too slow in its pace.
That's so strange to me.
I mean, I think it
guess.
just takes its time.
Yeah,
I mean,
does.
I guess if you come to this for, spooky ghost movie, then you're not going to get what you want. Yeah. So then he hides in the closet, wakes up the next day. I love that little button on that of the other woman opening the closet door, and they just scream at each other, and Carlos runs away.
It's good.
I also love that he doesn't really get in trouble for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jaime gives. Also, I totally missed in here somewhere. Dr. Cesaris shows Carlos the fetuses in jars.
Yeah,
yeah, sorry, that happened
jars.
earlier. We missed that, but we talked about it.
Yeah, we touched it already.
It cures impotence, which is why my only written review of this movie to date, because I didn't write one this time on this watch, is because at the time I was watching stuff on Hulu and it just kept showing the same Hims ad, which is like a, like an ED medication something.
Yeah.
And I just love the idea of a Hims ad where they're just like, and now I feel like a rock star again, but they're just drinking pickled fetus rum.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I feel like there's room for that really
Untapped
super
market
niche
potential.
parody. So yeah, Jaime gives Jacinto's fiance Conchita a ring while Dr. Cesaris prepares to head into the village. He goes into the village, and people are being killed, including
the tutor.
Yeah, Carlos's tutor, who dropped him off at the orphanage. Who knows where the gold is and everything.
Yeah.
He returns. So Cesaris returns and convinces Carmen that they must evacuate the children. This also happened way earlier than I thought it did. Again, I just was like, wow, okay, we're moving. That they must evacuate the children to a safer location. Jacinto hears of this plan and confronts Carmen, demanding the stash of gold and crassly bringing up their sexual relationship in front of Dr. Cesaris. Rude. As I called him, poor Dr. Old Man.
Poor Dr. Old Man.
About him. Enraged, Cesaris turns a gun on Jacinto and forces him out of the building. He says, get out.
Yeah. But I really love when Carmen just smacks him with the cane, just clocks him.
Oh, yeah. It's great.
Pop. It's really good.
Whap. It's really good. So as the orphans and faculty prepare to leave, Conchita discovers Jacinto. I love that no one checked to make sure he actually left. They were just like, get out of here. Then he just went around to the other side of the building.
Yeah.
I guess. Anyway, it's not a knock on the film.
Also, seeing all of this written out right now reminded me of another thing that Del Toro talked about, where the good alignment characters all have C names. So Carlos, Conchita, Carmen, Cesar, and the bad characters are J's, and so that's why Jaime and Jacinto, you're wondering where Jaime is going to land. But
right, because again, you're like, is he a reflection of Jacinto?
He grows beyond that.
He does,
which I think is interesting.
And Santi is outside of that realm.
Exactly.
Really good.
Very interesting.
Very interesting. Especially because usually they're like, don't name your characters all starting with the same letter. It's confusing. It's like, no, actually, I think it's fine.
No, it's okay.
So yeah, they're preparing to leave. Discover Jacinto pouring gasoline around the kitchen. Horrified, she threatens him with a gun, shoots him. He throws his cigarette to the floor. He starts the fire, flees the building. Conchita alerts Carmen and Cesaris, who order the children out of the building before the many cans of gasoline in the kitchen explode. Carmen and fellow teacher Alma, shout out Alma,
shout out to Alma,
does very little and then just gets absolutely eaten by flames. It completely enveloped. And many of the children are killed, just as the ghost had predicted.
This 45-second stretch of ratcheting tension of shooting the cigarette is so well edited and so well paced. Just ridiculous amounts of tension of just God, is it good? It's going to happen, but you don't want it to, and then it does, and you're like. And what I like too is that it builds to this crescendo of the flames enveloping Alma, and that first explosion happening. You're like, oh, okay, that's the explosion. And then the car goes off, and the car blows up and hits camera, and you're like, shit.
One thing that is very funny to me is that it just felt very 2001 to me, is that car piece coming at the camera, and then it blacking out from that. I don't know. I was just like...
Very 2001.
I just love when we were like, let's just have something hit the camera.
Yeah.
Now we can do it. Transition. And also it's crazy how many boys die. I know that Santi is saying it the whole time, but you're kind of like, they'll stop it.
Yeah, there's 6 who make it out?
Yeah. There's 6 boys who survive. Of 15, 20?
Yeah.
Something like that? Yeah. So Cesaris comes to. He finds Carmen mortally wounded inside the wrecked building. Her leg is the most Del Toro thing in the world, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Her prosthetic
very
leg.
Del Toro. Yeah, so good.
He tearfully stays with her as she dies. He and the surviving boys
gives her a poem.
Including Carlos, Jaime, Galvez, and yes, he does. I'm sorry.
And the poem makes me cry. I'm like,
I'm sorry, Parker.
It's okay.
Sorry, this movie makes you cry.
And you gave it 4 stars.
Imagine
shit.
Imagine someone being mad when a movie makes them cry. They're like,
toxic male being like, fuck that movie, made me cry.
So yeah, anyway, they remain in the charred orphanage. Cesaris promising not to leave them. He sets up a chair by a front window and waits there with a shotgun for Jacinto's return.
I love this little moment he has because he sits in the chair. Excuse me. He sits in the chair. He's got his shotgun. And he says, I'm never going to leave this place. And as he says that, a fly lands on his arm. And I'm just like, nope, you're not.
That's really good.
It's really good. It's a
great.
lovely little detail.
Also feels very Night of the Hunter.
Very much so.
Old person standing with a shotgun ready to defend these kids.
Look, I am a simple man. If you show me a elderly person defending children with a shotgun, it's going to tug at my little heartstrings.
Yeah, of course. I hope you get to do that one day.
That's all I want.
Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, the following night, Jaime finally tells Carlos the details of Santi's disappearance. Jaime and Santi had been collecting slugs at the cistern. They spied Jacinto attempting to open the safe where the gold was kept. Jaime ran and hid, but Jacinto cornered Santi, attempted to threaten him into keeping his mouth shut. In anger, Jacinto shoved Santi against, I would say, not necessarily in anger. Santi bites him, and he just kind of throws him away.
It's an accident. It's totally an accident.
It's completely an accident, and Santi hits his head, and it's very upsetting watching him, kind of seize.
They built they did a full silicone cast of this kid's upper body because they wanted a shot specifically. Del Toro's like, we need to slam this kid's head against the wall, and we can't do it with a real kid, so it's just a body double. They just bam, and it's on screen for probably 14 frames. But it hits hard.
Wow. Yeah. Jacinto ties stones to Santi, and just before sinking the body in, Jaime gets a moment alone where he goes in and sits with him, and that's what we saw in the title sequence. Yep. Santi sinks, and Jaime runs out very upset, and that's when the bomb lands.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. I'm also they dropped the bomb into the mud. Right?
Yeah.
They built a bomb and they dropped it into mud.
Yes, they did.
Because I love how it looks like the sploosh of it all looks great.
Yeah, it's really good.
So at the end of the story, Jaime explains that he is no longer scared of Jacinto and will kill him if he ever returns. Conchita, meanwhile, is doing the long walk to the nearest town for help. She runs into Jacinto and his 2 cronies, and he kills her.
Yep.
It's terrible. Makes me feel
And
real
it's
bad.
again, it's so interesting to me the way that he is written, where like this is not a moment out of like spite. It's not like him lashing out. It's like, you help those kids. He's like trying to save face. He's like, you're making me look like a fool. Say you're sorry.
Yeah.
Get in the car. He's like, just say you're sorry. And she's like, fuck you. No, I'm not going to do that.
And he kills
so
her.
he kills her.
Yeah.
Because he's a psychopath. And like, I like the slow death of that. Makes it feel more like psychotic, you know?
Yeah. Is this where you want to talk about his hair, or do you want to talk about it later?
No, later.
Okay.
It's
All right.
coming. Also, a
curious.
quick aside is Del Toro wrote an entire like backstory biography for Jacinto and gave it to the actor. And he's like, this is your entire life. He's like, we're not going to cover any of this, but he's like, I want you to know. And he's like,
Oh,
okay,
that's great.
cool. Yeah.
I feel like Conchita doesn't really have a lot to do here,
She does not. No, she's
which is fine.
not much of a character.
It's fine.
And that's okay.
That's fine. Yeah, that's okay. Not every character.
I
has
do.
to
I
be a
really like
character.
the moment her and Jaime share before she starts her walk, where
Yes, that is true.
like because she's been giving everybody like a grain of strength or whatever at breakfast, and he's like, hey, grain of strength. She gives it to him, and she like holds up his ring and then turns it into like a closed
Yeah.
fist, and she's like, hey, we got this. It's a nice little moment.
Yeah. I wonder if Jaime will ever see that ring again.
Curious.
Dr. Cazares finally dies of his injuries. Oh, I'm sorry. Carlos has one more encounter with Santi's ghost, and is no longer afraid after hearing the story of Santi's death. Santi's just like, bring him to me.
Yeah,
Carlos
he's
is
like, what do you
"Okay."
want? What can I? He's like, what do you need?
Like,
he's like, Jacinto.
Yes. Yeah, bring him to me. Very effectively spooky.
Yep.
Dr. Cazares finally dies of his injuries while still sitting by the window with the gun. Jacinto and his associates reach the orphanage, imprison the orphans in one room. The two other men eventually grow impatient and leave because they open the safe and the gold isn't in there.
Yeah.
Also,
and they
earlier,
haven't really
Carmen
believed him this whole time.
Yeah, they haven't. And Carmen earlier alluded to it. She said, "Man, my bad leg is heavier than ever."
Yep.
So yeah, the orphans know that Jacinto's going to kill them once he finds the gold. They fashion weapons from sharpened sticks and broken glass.
Mm-hmm.
And Galvarez or whatever the kid's name is, he breaks his ankle as he drops down, and that's it's a bummer.
Yeah.
When I see
Another
that, I
one
go,
of those shots where we're like, ooh. Yep.
And then Cazares' ghost lets them out.
Mm-hmm.
That's very nice.
Very nice. And like
Lovely.
again, like this is a nice ghost cinema moment for me as well, where like ghost can help within parameters, right?
Yeah.
It's like, because he's like, hey, be safe. It's dangerous. Like, he told us it's going to be all right, but he can't stop Jacinto. Like he doesn't
No.
have that ability, but he can't open the door for them, right?
Yeah.
In the same way that like Santi can do something later, but he can't. Like, he's like, bring him to me first.
Yeah.
And I like
They're
that.
very
I like,
limited. Yeah.
I like ghosts having abilities, but limited.
Well, they're not poltergeists, Parker.
Yeah. Right. Naturally.
They're just ghosts.
They're just ghosts. They're just
They're just
little
normal ghosts.
lowercase j g ghosts.
Lowercase j ghost.
Ghosts.
So yeah, the boys have weapons. They get let out. Jacinto gets abandoned. He's like, ha, wow, the gold's all for me. It's a very like villain line. He's like, it's all for me. You know,
Mine, all mine.
Mine, all mine. He doesn't say that. I don't know why we're saying that he said that. He goes back inside, and they trick him. They say, hey, asshole, or whatever. And then they run
He raises a
downstairs.
shotgun to shoot him.
Yeah.
And Jaime sneaks up behind him and stabs him in the armpit.
Well, yeah, so he gets down there, he raises the gun to shoot him, stabs him in the arm. Terrible place to get stabbed. Another shot that's just very upsetting.
Every Del Toro movie has what I have coined as a Del Goro moment, where he picks very specific visceral injuries that just make you cringe. This one's the armpit. Pan's Labyrinth has somebody's face like bashed in with a bottle. Like,
Yeah.
there's just moments where he picks like hyper specific things to just make you go like, oh, yike. He's very good
Kronos,
at it.
there's a little guy in your heart.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't know, Parker. So yeah, they stab him, and I love that they keep stabbing him. There's a really great shot with a fake arm where they stab into his arm, and that's really good.
So this scene right here is where I want to bring up the hair.
Okay.
So earlier you mentioned the Brendan Fraser of it all. He's got
the Brendan Fraser and the mummy.
the swooped bangs or whatever. But it's very well kept, right? It's loose, but it's slicked. And in this moment, the final shot of him before they push him in is him on the ground, like he's looking up. He looks like a wounded animal. He's just snarling at them. And his hair is so messy and frizzy, and it looks like the rest of the boy's hair. He looks like an orphan in that one
that's
shot.
nice.
And I noticed that this time. I was like, that's really, his hair doesn't look like that for the rest of the movie, but that one shot, it is this frizz ball at the front of his head, and he looks like Carlos. And I really like that little moment.
That's great.
Yeah.
I did not notice that, so thank you for bringing that up.
Mm-hmm.
They throw him in. Santi takes him down. I love that he's trying to get the gold out of his pockets.
Yeah. Weighed
Also,
down by the very thing he sought.
It's almost
Folktale,
too,
baby.
It's almost too perfect. I was going to say, here are my last few notes on all of this before we wrap up. I love that when Conchita fires the shotgun, it completely knocks her back.
Yeah.
Like, I just thought that was a very good, like, realistic depiction of, firing a gun, not fully grounded. The sound design on the gold bars when Jacinto gathers them, I'm like, that's like, I want to
nice
bite them.
ting
I want to
to 'em.
bite them. There's just like this nice, like, clink, clink, clink. And also, Parker, would you go gather slugs with me, or are we not friends like that?
No, we're friends like that.
Okay, so you'd come with me to go gather slugs.
Yeah.
Put them in a
Will
box.
might accidentally kill you, but like, sure.
I like that Will is Jacinto in
Yeah,
this situation.
of course. Who else would he be?
I don't know, man.
For the record, Will Kauser is a wonderful, kind human being.
Yeah, but he would kill me if I saw
He
where
would kill you by
if I
accident.
saw him trying to get the gold bars.
Yeah.
He would accidentally kill me if I bit him. Sure. Santi's ghost appears from the depths and grabs Jacinto to his knee, drags him down.
I loved like this moment. I like a lot because, like, you don't know what he's doing to him. Like he like hugs him, and like it's almost like a vampire pose, and then like Jacinto like cries out.
I thought he was just like weighing him down.
Well, I think he is, but like that moment of him like crying out in pain, I'm always like, what is he doing to him that like makes him be like, ah?
Oh,
Is
I
it
thought he was just going, ah.
Oh, sure.
I've always been confused by it because he doesn't go huh, when he sees the ghost. He like turns
Right.
and sees the ghost.
That's
and then the
why
ghost
that's why
latches onto him.
I thought it was a pain thing. I thought like,
Interesting.
Santi's sucking his life force away.
Oh,
in
I
some
thought he was.
horrible way.
I thought he was just like
maybe
because I would if a young ghost,
a young ghost.
latched onto me and dragged me to my death, I might go
Right.
Yeah. It's spooky.
Spooky.
Anyway, and then his pictures float up into the amber-colored water. The photos of Jacinto, and now he is also trapped in the amber forever.
Yes.
It'd be interesting to know if he became a ghost. Having vanquished the enemy and escaped with their lives, the remaining boys leave the orphanage. In the long walk to town, we get that narration comes back, and Dr. Cazares' ghost watches them from the doorway. He says, "I am a ghost. That's what I am."
Yep.
And it's like the shot in The Searchers. It's a great shot.
It is a really good shirt.
Really good silhouette. Really good use of the silhouette.
Of
And I
like
love
him
that his-
in the shadow of the building.
I was gonna say the shadow of the building.
Yeah.
Ghost is stuck in the shadow of the building. Ghost in
Yeah.
the building. Ghost in the shadow of the building. Shadow of the building as a ghost.
So that could have been the title of the movie, is what I'm hearing.
That whole thing, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a more relevant title. Ghost in
think
the
so.
building, shadow of the ghost of the building, shadow of the building is the ghost and the ghost.
Yep.
Every haunted house movie should be called Ghost in the Building.
I think so.
Well, that's the Devil's Backbone.
That's the
Do you
Devil's
have any
Backbone.
final little notes you want to bring up on production or on your feelings? You love this movie.
I do like this movie a lot. I do love this movie.
I was gonna say if you don't
No.
agree that you love it, I'm gonna.
No,
be
I
like,
do. I
well,
love
that's-
it. I like, and that's the thing is like I think I might have had this at 4.5, and then I sat with it and I was like, it can be 5. Like I can
You're
just
allowed
give it 5.
something. All bits aside, Parker, you're allowed to love a movie.
Oh, gee, thanks.
You're welcome.
But yeah, I think we covered all the things I wanted to talk about. So let's hop into criteria because I wanna suss out this 4 stars.
Also, okay, well, let's start there then.
All right, let's address the 4 stars in the room.
Parker, you're not gonna
What's
like
not
my
working
answer.
here?
You're not gonna like my answer.
I'm sure I won't, but that's okay.
I don't know.
Man, I don't like
can't-
that answer.
I can't.
Here I was ready to justify anything you had to say. Like, yeah, Max, I could see that. You don't know?
I can't put a finger on it.
That's fair. I get it.
Okay, so I couldn't put a finger on it, and then I watched this with my dad, and we talked about it afterward. And I just feel that there's a lot of emotion here, and I don't know if the kid performances meet it for me. I think the only kid who really emotes in this movie is Jaime when Santi dies. But because Carlos isn't that afraid of Santi, there's just not a lot of like emotion from the boys, which is not to say that's a problem. I don't think that's a problem that the film has. I just think for me, I'm not connecting with the kids in this movie in the way, to compare it to other movies we talked about this year on this podcast, Central Station and Cinema Paradiso.
Sure.
Are both movies with boys who I go, the emotions here are just like unreal. And like the performance of these emotions is so and all these boys mostly keep it pretty stoic in the face of explosions and death and ghosts. And that's not a knock on the film. I don't think that's a problem. It just means that I don't know who I'm connecting with emotionally other than like Jaime. And even then, the Jaime stuff is kind of behind a wall of flashback, you know? And like, it works. I can see what he's feeling. And I think that really works. The writing of it is really great. I think this is a incredibly well written and directed and produced. Like, it just, everything about this movie is really well done, but I'm just not connecting with it emotionally. Like, I don't cry over the poem like you do, you know? And I just find that very interesting.
And that's okay.
That's
that
a reason.
Sometimes.
That's a reason.
Sure.
But I still can't put my finger on why that's happening. Or rather, why that isn't happening for me.
No, I can totally see that.
So for me, I go, this is a great film. I just don't feel a lot when I watch it.
Yeah.
And there you go.
And that's okay.
And that's me. Well, now you're not mad at me anymore, and is that fun to listen to? Just contentment? So. Do people like to? I mean,
do people like contentment?
Do people like it when we try to put contentment in content? I don't know. I don't think this is
putting the content in content.
Putting the content in content.
Hey.
No.
Boo.
This is just a fun little thing we do. So criteria, Parker. Historical and technical relevance.
Can't really make much of an argument for it.
Can't really. Kane takes it. I mean, you could maybe be like Pan's Labyrinth if it was Pan's Labyrinth, because I feel like that's got some interesting, at least has like more of an impact on culture. But this is its own cute, wonderful little movie that is fantastic.
Yeah, it's a niche little object.
It's a niche little object, and that's great.
Yeah. Kane gets the point, 100%.
Okay. How well do you think it's doing what it's trying to do?
See, this is interesting, and this is where I think you and I depart, is that, like, I do emotionally connect with this movie, and I couldn't tell you exactly why, because I can see exactly what you're talking about with, like, the child performances of... They're not great across the board.
I don't think they're bad.
They're not bad.
I don't think
like,
they're too wooden, but it's just kind of like
just
there's not a
they're
lot...
stoic, you know? It is very removed. And I think, like... leaning on the adults in the film helps me a lot. Like, I really like their dynamics.
I think, like, everything with Jacinto, everything with Cesaris, like, I think that all really works for me. And
I think for me, like, if what this movie is trying to do is to be a ghost movie, I think it does it pretty well. Like, all of the elements with Santi, I don't know that there's anything in there that I would change. You know, I think it works.
I think for this specific version of a ghost movie, because a lot of the time with a ghost movie, I want more haunting sequences.
Totally.
I want more like spooky things happening, but that's not what this movie's doing.
Yeah.
Because even though it's more about the emotional state of a ghost than it is the physical capabilities and effect it has on everyone else.
Right. And
he is his own character. He is not an effect on everyone else.
Right. And as you're saying that, like, the thing that comes to mind that, again, you know, it's the argument we have of, like, you have to judge the movie for what it is, not like the movie that it could have been.
Yes.
But like an interesting area of potential that could be here to kind of, because I also am that place where I'm like, I want more haunting out of a ghost movie, generally speaking. It would be so interesting to me if throughout this movie, Jacinto's being haunted by Santi. And he doesn't know that it's Santi, you know?
It is fascinating that, I mean, it makes the ending very cathartic, but it is very interesting that Santi lives in the place where Jacinto lives. And the only moment we really get of him haunting him is when Jacinto's investigating the safe and he hears a whisper from the stairwell down to the cistern. And he kind of is like, you know, but I am like, did he haunt you? Like...
Yeah, and like
that would have been really fun to do.
Totally. And like if I was to try and guess Del Toro's response to this, it would probably be something along the lines of like, a ghost will make itself present to those who are like willing to hear it out, you know?
Yeah. Because like, also, this isn't a horror movie.
No.
This is a drama.
It's a drama.
It's a drama, and it has a ghost in it. But again, it's really not a horror movie.
Not really.
And I feel like it would be a horror movie if Santi was haunting Jacinto.
Yeah. And I think that's
Right.
part of the reason why I do like the movie is because it is a drama with a ghost in it. And we don't
Which
get a lot of
is
those.
completely valid. And I'm not, it's not
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I'm like, I want my ghost movies to be scary. But
No,
it's
no,
just
no.
like,
I'm just, yeah.
I think that's a very good point to make, is that this isn't a horror movie. It's a drama with a ghost in it.
Yeah.
Ghost in the drama and the ghost. And the ghost
So
in the
coming back around to, is it doing what it's trying to do? Or how well is it doing what it's trying to do? I think it's doing it fairly well. The question being, is it doing it better than Citizen Kane? I don't know.
I think, yeah, that's a good point. Well, I don't know. I mean, like, everything with Santi is really well done. I think they're absolutely executing Santi perfectly.
Yeah.
I think everything with Jacinto, like the way that we slowly build the tension with him and we build
Mm-hmm.
to what he's going to do and what he's doing, it doesn't feel like we rush into that at all. So I do feel like that's actually great.
Yeah. Like,
Like
I feel like
Carlos?
the only thing here that doesn't work for me is the central metaphor of the title. Like we talked about.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't come in. But everything else, literally like the bomb, the orphanage, the ghost, the payoff, like on paper, I think all of the other elements of this are working really well. I think this
Yeah.
movie does a wonderful job of setup and payoff in every aspect, minus
Yeah.
that one throw in of, hey, here's fetus rum juice, devil's backbone.
Fetus rum. Fetus rum. Everybody? Are we all saying it together? Okay, no? Okay.
No. You're on your own. You've been abandoned.
I think
I've abandoned my co-host.
wow.
I don't know why
I'm worried.
Daniel's still
worried.
here.
I'm worried we'll never shake Daniel.
Yeah,
Plainview
I think we're going to be
mentions
haunted
Influence
by
Afterlife.
Daniel Plainview for the rest of our days.
I did mention that with my dad, and I joked about that. Is the idea of Daniel Plainview encountering a ghost or being a ghost is like, oh no, that's
Oh, dear.
terrible. Oh, it's upsetting. I don't want that guy to be around forever.
So I'm gonna stick to my guns. I'm gonna give it the point. What do you think?
Okay, I think, yeah. I mean, criteria of our podcast that we've established. I don't know. It is doing it's doing what it's doing very well.
Yeah.
I would say it's basically neck and neck for me.
Okay.
That's where I stand. I don't know. I'll let you give the point
Well,
to it.
I'm predicting where the rest of the points are gonna land. So let's say that this one goes to
Okay.
Backbone,
Okay.
and then this one, how well are you connecting with it? You already went into.
Yeah. I mean, I don't emotionally connect with it.
Do you emotionally connect with Citizen Kane though?
Well, here's the thing, Parker, is that I've just started coming around to Citizen Kane more. I
Yeah.
need to rewatch it to actually figure out what I'm feeling. I feel like a better way to answer this would be right now, like in my data, I think I'd be more excited to revisit Citizen Kane than I would be this again, which is fascinating to me. Like, this is a great, sad, but it feels like Central Station to me. It feels
Sure.
like a movie that I go, oh, I can watch that like once every year or two
Mhm.
and really just be like, wow, what a great film. But it's
Yeah.
not something that I would necessarily think about a lot. I don't know. I'm really torn on this one. I really don't know. I think this movie has more of what I really like in a movie. Like, I really like the ghost stuff, but I think that ultimately it's a great drama that I'm not super drawn to
Sure.
in that way, you know? So I don't know. I don't. I mean, for you emotionally connect with this.
I do.
right?
I watched. Yeah, this makes it into my Halloween rotation almost every year since I've seen it.
Yeah.
Like, it's something that I do revisit. But it is one of the things that I only revisit it like once a year. It's not like I'm not watching this in March, you know? I'm not like, let's turn
Yeah.
on Devil's Backbone. It's always like, okay, we're in the spooky time season. Let's
Yeah.
watch a good ghost movie.
Even though this isn't too spooky,
it isn't, but it's got a hell of a ghost
but it's
in
a
it.
great movie. But it's a great ghost movie.
Yeah,
Wow. I feel like we've learned a lot about ghost movies today.
I think so. So my
I
personal
really don't
point would
know.
be going to this, but
Yeah.
it
Taking a step
sounds
back.
like yours is going to Kane.
But I really don't know. I don't know.
Well, let's
I'm in the middle of a big old Orson Welles phase right now.
can see
so I
that,
feel like
yes.
I'm biased.
very much so.
Just in that I'm very interested in revisiting Citizen Kane right now. But let's take a step back.
Yep.
I'm just opting out of
You're
criteria.
like, hey, criteria doesn't matter. We're out.
Like, I don't know about criteria today.
Taking a step back.
It's a great film. For me, I don't think it is. But for you, is this going to be like? I mean, we've split before, right?
We have split before, but we do inevitably come to a consensus. So yeah, like for the record, I think I am split. I personally like, and objectively taking a step back, I do think this is better than Citizen Kane. I think it's more engaging. I like the characters. I like the emotional arcs. I think it's all present and it works really well for me.
Yeah, like the metaphor and everything about it really works.
Yeah.
And yet, I just feel like I don't even know. I just want a little bit more of something in this.
Sure.
For me, it just feels like I just want a little bit more from something, from one element of this, either whether it's spookiness or it's like emotion or it's performance. Like it's such like an almost perfect folktale, like you're saying. It's almost like a perfect metaphor. It's a perfect allegory, which is what a great ghost story is in a lot of ways. And yet for me, I'm like, why
but there's
don't
something missing
I love
for
this? You. And so for me, I go, why? Do we have to defer to other movies to see where we feel? If
we try to keep this in a vacuum, but when we are split, when we need a
like
dividing vote, then I think we probably should consult the list.
I'm pulling up the list. Everyone.
Oh my God, he has a scroll. He's unfurling it.
So
Gold
on our list
lettering.
currently, Citizen Kane is at number 27.
Out of.
And again, I don't think we've ever pulled this out before. I don't think we've ever done this before.
No.
27 out of 42.
Yeah.
Yeah, because 44 episodes, but Citizen Kane in the middle. So, so Citizen Kane's at 27. Right above it is Klaus at 26, and right below it is Ex Machina at 28. I feel for this movie the way I feel for Ex Machina. Which is to say, a really excellent drama that I will revisit again, but I don't know when.
Yeah, I can see that.
But let's compare it to Klaus. I mean, Klaus is a very similar movie for you, a movie that you watch once a year seasonally and you think is fantastic, and a movie that I also think is good. Oh, no.
Yeah, we're back where we started.
Okay, but like looking at this, from like 25 to 30, 25 Lilo and Stitch, 26 Klaus, 27 Citizen Kane, 28 Ex Machina, 29 Central Station, 30 Ratatouille.
Yeah.
Do you feel this is better than Lilo and Stitch?
Yeah, I think I do.
I think I can say that as well. Even though I love Lilo and Stitch.
I also love it, yeah.
I'm just at such a conflicted place with Citizen Kane right now that I don't know. But I think I can say it is better than that.
You can't trust your own feelings.
Is it better than Puss in Boots: The Last Wish?
Max, you got gaslit by a book. My God.
Hey, all right. Is it better than Puss in Boots: The Last Wish?
This should be an easy answer. I can't wait for some
stars
day.
For you, is it?
Huh? Puss in Boots?
Yeah, is that 5 stars for you? It is.
I finally swallowed my pride and I made it 5 stars despite the frustrations with the misunderstanding. Sure. You know what it is? And this is such we're running out of time.
I know. I'm like we've been going for I'm sorry. I really threw a wrench in here.
No, you're good. Just like I think what it is, super quick, is that I have 27 years worth of societal indoctrination telling me that media made for children is less serious and less artistic. And so I'm sitting here and being like, I don't know, like I like Puss in Boots better than Devil's Backbone, but like Devil's Backbone is a serious drama like made by an artist. And so yet, I'm like, oh, well, like this should be better.
Think about it this way. Guillermo del Toro also had a hand in the creation of the
Totally. Absolutely he did.
And I think that Guillermo del Toro would be willing to say that if you were like, I really love Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, he would be like, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I think he would support you in that.
Yeah. So coming back to the Kane question of all of this, I like what it's hovering around. I like this better than Ex Machina. I like this better than Kane. And I like this better than Klaus. Yes. But I could easily see us slotting it in like just above Ex Machina, just below Kane, if that's where like you ended up feeling it needed to go.
But I don't want to make you do that.
That's okay. Like, Max, it's all right. It's fine. This is okay.
How about we view it this way? I gave you Klaus right above Citizen Kane.
You did. I
This
will give you
time,
Devil's Backbone.
You give me
right
Devil's
below.
Backbone right below
Yep.
Citizen Kane?
Yes, I'm willing to do that.
Feels crazy to me, but
All right,
Okay.
would you like to say it then?
yeah, because I won't make you say it. Because this is my opinion and not yours. The Devil's Backbone is not better than Citizen Kane.
There we go.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'll live.
Well, the good news is, Parker, is that next week it will be back to being a little more black and white as to how we're going to conclude our episode. Hopefully
I think
this
we should
doesn't
keep up the
happening.
tradition of black and white movies or black and white on Zoom. You know, I think it's a nice
yeah,
touch.
absolutely.
Yeah, we got to bring
see,
that back.
I mean, I was hoping to do more of like a black and white. It was a pun.
Oh,
but,
I see.
But you raise a good point. And next week, everyone who watches these will be able to see us in black and white. Because next week, Parker, what are we watching?
We are watching 1931's Frankenstein.
Never seen it.
Ooh, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. It's I don't know, like very classic Halloween entry, you know?
Yeah, and it feels like it because is that the first. I mean, we'll talk about it in the episode. Is
Sure.
it the first of kind of the Universal monster movies, or was there
Dracula came out, I think, a few months before, but they're the same year.
Really? Okay. Wow. Well, that's exciting then. I guess maybe there will be some sort of huge Citizen Kane comparison to be made
Could be.
in the
You never know.
story of a man.
Hey,
And that's
Guy
how
Fall
I choose.
movie.
That's how I choose to. It is a Guy Fall.
It is a Guy Fall movie.
Damn.
Damn.
Well, we'll see you all then next time. Happy Halloween season.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.